Do you really know the JavaScript basics that every programmer should have in their toolkit? In today's digital age, knowing JavaScript is no longer a nice-to-have, it's a must-have skill for any web developer. Whether you're a beginner or an experienced programmer, having a solid grasp of JavaScript basics is crucial to staying competitive in the industry. So, if you're ready to take your web development skills to the next level, let's dive into the basics. So, are you ready to learn the JavaScript basics that every programmer should know? Let's get started. Alright, before we dive into the world of JavaScript, let's talk about the tools you'll need to get started. You'll need a text editor such as Visual Studio Code and a web browser. Visual Studio Code is a popular text editor among web developers and it's free. It provides syntax highlighting, code completion, and debugging tools that make coding a breeze. You can also use other text editors like Sublime Text or Atom, but Visual Studio Code is a great choice for beginners. So, with your tools in place, let's move on to the fun part, writing JavaScript code. In JavaScript, a variable is a container that holds a value. You can think of it as a labeled box, where you can store a value. Variables are declared using the let, const, or var keywords, and they have different scoping rules. For example, variables declared with let and const are block scoped, while variables declared with var are function scoped. Data types in JavaScript are categorized into two groups, primitive data types and complex data types. Primitive data types include numbers, strings, booleans, null, and undefined. Complex data types include objects, arrays, and functions. Objects are collections of key-value pairs, while arrays are ordered collections of values. Functions in JavaScript are blocks of code that can be executed multiple times from different parts of your code. They're useful for encapsulating logic, reducing code duplication, and making your code more modular. Functions can take arguments, return values, and even be passed as arguments to other functions. Control structures in JavaScript include if-else statements, switch statements, and loops. If-else statements are used to make decisions based on conditions, while switch statements are used to execute different blocks of code based on the value of an expression. Loops, on the other hand, are used to execute a block of code repeatedly. Let's talk about if-else statements. An if statement checks a condition and executes a block of code if the condition is true. An else statement is used to specify a block of code to execute if the condition is false. You can also use else if statements to check multiple conditions. Switch statements are used to execute different blocks of code based on the value of an expression. They're useful when you need to handle multiple cases, and they're more efficient than using multiple if-else statements. Loops in JavaScript include for loops, while loops, and do-while loops. For loops are used to execute a block of code for a specified number of iterations, while loops are used to execute a block of code while a condition is true. Do-while loops are used to execute a block of code at least once and then repeat it while a condition is true. When writing JavaScript code, it's essential to follow best practices to make your code clean, efficient, and easy to maintain. One of the most important things to do is to use meaningful variable names and follow a consistent naming convention. Using comments in your code is also important, as it helps other developers understand what your code is doing. You can use single-line comments or multi-line comments to explain your code. When you're writing JavaScript code, it's easy to make mistakes that can be difficult to debug. One common mistake is syntax errors, which occur when you forget a semicolon or misspell a keyword. Logical errors are also common, and they can be more difficult to spot. They occur when your code is syntactically correct, but it doesn't do what you intended to do. To debug your code, you can use the console.log function to print messages to the console, or you can use a debugger to step through your code line by line. In this video, we've covered the JavaScript basics that every programmer should know. We've learned about variables, data types, functions, and control structures. These concepts are essential for building interactive websites, and they're the foundation of more advanced JavaScript topics like object-oriented programming, asynchronous programming, and DOM manipulation. If you're new to JavaScript, I hope this video has given you a solid introduction. Remember to practice what you've learned and don't be afraid to experiment with different code examples. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to check out my other videos for more JavaScript tutorials.